Charleston, South Carolina, 1855. Evening settled over Charleston slowly, almost lazily, drifting through the branches of old oaks and catching on the hanging moss like a curtain that refused to be drawn aside. The city moved in its familiar rhythm. Carriages rattled over cobblestones. The few passersby hurried home, and the river exhaled its heavy scent of water and reeds, like the breath of some great sleeping creature. Along Meeting Street walked a woman dressed in black. Her figure stood out even against the dimming street. She did not hurry, yet her steps were tense, restrained, as if she were suppressing the urge to run. Her face was hidden behind a thick veil, but the people of Charleston knew who she was. Her name was Elizabeth Cole, and since the end of January, she had been a widow. Her husband, the captain of the merchant ship St. Mary, died a senseless and brutal death. They found him at night in a narrow alley by the docks, his skull split open and his purse missing. The police declared it the work of robbers. There were more of them in the port that winter than usual. But many believed the matter wasn't so simple. Charleston lived on rumors, and Elizabeth, without wanting it, became part of them. Since then, every evening, and often late at night, she was seen wandering the streets. She traced the path her husband once took, from their house on Chalmers Lane to the alley where he was found. It was as though she followed a shadow, something that slipped away but never disappeared entirely. So they called her the Crying Widow of Charleston, though no one had ever seen her shed a tear. Elizabeth had never been prone to hysteria or rash actions. She had always been considered measured and calm, capable of preserving her dignity even when society cast sidelong glances her way, because her husband came from no wealthy family, but was merely a sailor. She valued his honesty and strength, and he, they said, adored her. But after his death, she changed. Those who dared speak with her noted that she often listened to sounds inaccessible to others, as if catching footsteps, breaths, rustles that left no trace. And at night, neighbors said, she would go down into the yard and stare at the street for a long time, as though waiting for someone. Those stories might have been embellished. Charleston loved to decorate its reality. But in a city full of old houses, creaking floors, and narrow alleys, truth was often judged not by facts, but by resonance, by how well it fit the fabric of life. So no one was particularly shocked when Elizabeth once said, "I saw him." What shocked them was how she said it, not tragically, not frantically, but quietly, firmly, almost matter-of-factly, as though it were simply an observation. The first person she told this to was Father Patrick O'Shea, the priest of the Irish Church of the Holy Virgin on King Street. He had long known the Cole family, had baptized their neighbors' children, blessed sailors before voyages, and buried those the sea never returned. But after the captain's death, he faced something he disliked admitting. Grief sometimes opens doors better kept closed. Elizabeth came to him on an early March morning. The church was cool inside, the air smelling of wax and damp stone. She sat on a bench, placed her hands on her knees, and remained silent. O'Shea waited. "Father," she said at last, "I must tell you something. But please, do not rush to say this is only grief, that I'm imagining things. I know what people say about me." "I'm listening," he answered gently. "I saw him," she repeated. "Thomas." He said nothing. Quick words would only break her fragile trust. "Where did you see him?" "Where he died." She recounted it plainly, almost dryly. How she went out late at night, how she felt someone walking behind her, how she looked up and saw his silhouette at the end of the alley. He stood in the half-dark, one hand against the wall. He wasn't like a man, she said, but not like a shadow either, just as if he were there. You walked toward him? No, he vanished, as though he stepped around a corner. But when I reached it, no one was there. Were you afraid? She shook her head. No, I felt relief, as if he was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't hear it. The priest told her what a priest must. Grief can shape images, sometimes very convincing ones. It doesn't mean you're losing your mind. It means your heart seeks what it lost. Elizabeth listened carefully, but there was quiet resolve in her eyes. What I saw, Father, she said, was not born of grief. It was a reminder. A reminder of what? That his death was not simple, and that I must learn the truth. She left him alone with the empty church and the uneasy thought that some sorrows are too deep to soothe with words. Charleston lived by the water and depended on it. The port was its heart. Merchant ships arrived and departed daily, carrying cotton, rice, tobacco, and sometimes rumors, trouble, and inconvenient truths. In the district where Thomas Cole was killed, the streets were narrow and crooked, the buildings pressed together like molded clay. It was familiar ground for sailors, a place to exchange money, buy tools, or slip into a tavern after long voyages. On the night he died, someone else had been there. That much was obvious. But the police, occupied with louder matters, didn't bother to investigate. A robbery gone wrong, they said, and closed the case. Elizabeth could not accept that. She began asking around the port. People treated her with respect, not only because of her loss, but because her calmness felt strangely unyielding. The first person she approached was an old sailor named Jonas Green. He had once served on the same ship as Thomas, and was said to be the last person who had seen him alive. He lived in a small room above a shop that smelled of tar and rope. Jonas opened the door, revealing a man with a sallow face and eyes filled with a permanent, weary emptiness. "Mrs. Cole," he muttered, "what brings you here?" "I want to talk about my husband." Inside, the room smelled of cheap rum. Jonas sat her down, then sat opposite her, staring at the floor. "Thomas was a good man," he said after a pause. "You know I always respected him." "Then tell me the truth," she said quietly. "I ask only that." He hesitated for a long time, then poured himself rum, drank, and exhaled. "I saw him that evening," he said, "but he wasn't alone." Elizabeth felt tension coil inside her, though her face stayed still. "Who?" "The owner of warehouse number 7, Mr. Allen Burroughs." The name landed heavily. Burroughs was an influential man, respected and at times feared. Strict but fair, people said. Others whispered that he could be ruthless if crossed. "What were they discussing?" she asked. "I don't know, but it looked like Thomas didn't want to go with him, and Burroughs insisted." "And then?" Jonas gripped his glass until his knuckles whitened. "I left, didn't want to be involved, and the next morning I heard Thomas was found dead." "Why didn't you tell the police?" "Because Burroughs is a man best left unprovoked." Elizabeth knew she could not turn back now. The path was set. The next day, she went to see Burroughs. His house stood in the wealthier part of town, large, stately, with white columns and a manicured garden. A servant led her to the study, where the man sat behind a heavy desk, reading papers. He rose when she entered. His face was broad, stern, his eyes dark and watchful. "Mrs. Cole," he said, "my condolences. How may I help you?" Elizabeth removed her veil. Burroughs examined her carefully, and she caught a flicker of tension on his face. Barely visible, but present. "I came to ask what happened that night," she said, "and why my husband was near your warehouse." Burroughs sat down slowly. "I don't know what you mean." "Jonas Green saw you with him. He said you insisted on speaking with him." "Jonas?" Burroughs' brows rose. "That man drinks more than he breathes, and you trust him?" "I listen to everyone," she replied calmly, "and seek truth among what I hear." He leaned forward. "If you want the truth, your husband owed me money. A small sum. He came to repay it. We talked. Nothing more." "Money," she repeated softly. "Thomas never hid debts from me." "Perhaps he didn't want to worry you." He said this too quickly, as if rehearsed. Elizabeth stood. "Thank you, Mr. Burroughs. I will return when I have more questions." He watched her leave, intently, almost studying her. And in his gaze, she saw neither sympathy nor sorrow. Only caution. Her nighttime walks continued. But now they were not merely attempts to draw close to the man she lost. They became a pursuit. Sometimes she lingered in the alley where he died. At times she thought she saw his silhouette again. But every time she stepped forward, the shape dissolved into darkness, as though warning, not yet. Charleston at night seemed like a different city. Foreign, closed. Every noise grew louder, every pause stretched. The houses felt like old witnesses watching in silence. One evening at the end of March, with the streets deserted, she heard footsteps behind her. She stopped. They stopped. She turned. No one. She walked on. The footsteps resumed. She quickened her pace. So did they. The alley led her to the brick wall of a warehouse. She stopped, and the footsteps fell silent. Then a figure appeared beside her. He stepped out of the shadows almost without sound. Elizabeth did not flinch. Fear had long dissolved into resolve. "Who are you?" she asked. The stranger remained silent. He was tall, in a long coat, his face hidden by the brim of a hat. "I know you've been following me," she said. "Why?" Long silence. Then he spoke, voice rough. "Stop searching for what may destroy you." "I search for truth. If you know it, tell me." He stepped back into the shadows. "They don't want this uncovered," he said. "You must leave before it's too late." "Who are they?" But he was already gone. The next day, she returned to Father Patrick. One look at her told him something had sharpened within her. "You're pale," he said. "Something happened?" She told him of the nighttime encounter. He frowned. "You must be careful. There are men in this city who prefer silence over questions." "You think I'm in danger?" "I do. And if your husband didn't die at the hands of robbers, then someone wanted him dead." "I know that," she said, "but I will not stop." "At least stay indoors at night?" She lowered her gaze. "At night I hear him." O'Shea exhaled heavily. "What you call his presence may be a warning, or your grief painting shadows. Grief is a cunning artist." "If it is grief that writes these messages," she said, "then it writes with too much purpose and too much fear in those who wish me blind." She needed more than memories. She needed records. At the port registry office, she found Mr. Nolan, a meticulous man with sharp eyes. He remembered everyone, captains, deckhands, debtors, and those who took too many advances. She asked for the St. Mary records from November to January. He hesitated but complied. The lines were neat and orderly, but something was missing. There's no record of November cargo, she noted, yet December states the ship returned fully loaded. Perhaps an error, Nolan muttered. Records don't disappear by accident. He removed his glasses with a sigh. Mrs. Cole, Thomas was involved with Burroughs. He transported something besides cargo. Everyone knew, but no one spoke. What? Not goods, people. He paused. Runaways, hoping for freedom. Elizabeth's blood ran cold. Thomas would never do that for money. If he carried them, he was helping. Nolan nodded. He did it because he believed it right, but for Burroughs, such actions meant trouble. Serious trouble. Now the pattern emerged, dark but coherent. Captain Cole's had become a liability. Elizabeth grew harder, steadier. Truth was a ship she meant to build, plank by plank. In early April, she went again to Warehouse 7. She slipped inside when the guard was distracted. The interior smelled of rust and dampness. Rows of crates towered like crouching figures. At the far wall, she found a locked metal door, unusual for a warehouse, a soft sound behind her. She turned and saw a silhouette, tall, broad-shouldered, familiar. Her heart tightened, not with fear. "Thomas," she whispered. The figure didn't move, but she felt its attention. "If you're here, if you want me to know the truth, give me a sign." Silence. Then a faint creak. The metal door behind the figure quivered, as if touched from within. She stepped forward. A cold hand seized her shoulder. She spun around and saw the stranger from the alley. "I warned you," he said. "You must leave." In daylight, she could finally see him better. Hooded, guarded, tense. "Who are you?" "One who didn't want Captain Cole dead," he said, "and one who knows you're following his trail too closely. If you want to help, tell me the truth." He sighed heavily. "Your husband helped runaways. He did it because he believed it right. But he didn't know Burroughs used his ship for his own dealings, deals that could ruin him if exposed." "Burroughs killed him?" "Not with his own hands, but the order came from him." "Why do you help me?" He hesitated. "He once saved my life. This is my repayment. Then help me finish what he began." Voices sounded outside. "Meet me tomorrow at dawn behind Fletcher's Rest Inn," he said. "I'll tell you everything." He disappeared into the shadows. She left without looking back, but the city watched her. At dawn, she met him by the river behind Fletcher's Rest. Mist curled over the water. "We have little time," he said. "Burroughs sees you as a threat." "I'm not afraid." "Fear for the truth, then. It dies easily." He handed her a wrapped bundle. "These are the real logs. Thomas kept them hidden. Proof he carried people. Proof Burroughs knew. And records of Burroughs' illegal shipments." She hid them under her cloak. "Why give them to me? If I keep them, I die. But you, they won't touch immediately. They fear scandal." "What must I do?" "Find someone who dares stand against him. Show him this." "Who?" He told her the name. Then 3 men rounded the corner. He shoved her aside. "Run!" She ran. She heard a shout, a dull blow, another. She did not turn. In the following days, she lived under the weight of fear and clarity. The name he gave her belonged to Samuel Reed, a young lawyer known for integrity rare in his profession. He fought corruption in the port and had enemies to prove it. When she placed the bundle before him, his face went pale. "Do you understand what this is?" he asked. "Proof," she said, "that my husband did not die by chance." "This is war, Mrs. Cole," he said. "War with a man of wealth, influence, and the will to silence anyone. Are you prepared for what follows?" I have long been prepared." He began the work. Rumors spread faster than documents reached the court. Charleston started whispering. Burroughs' name became a murmur. One evening, returning home, Elizabeth found him waiting at her door. A powerful figure, motionless,